Thank you so much for watching. Before we get into it today, please make sure you've subscribed to the channel, like this video, follow me on Instagram at felix.levine, and if you have something to say, please leave a comment. Now let's get into it. Laura, thank you, truly thank you so much for taking the time today. I know you're busy, but I'm really excited to have you on. I'm a big fan of yours, UFC, obviously. So thank you for taking the time.
No, thank you. I know we were supposed to do this ages ago, and then, like many things, screw COVID, messed it all up. But we're here now, so I'm excited.
Well, it's funny you say that because this sounds like to MMA fans. I'm gonna give a quick rundown of how it should have happened, or how I hoped in my head it was gonna happen. I think I had reached out to you before UFC 249, which originally was supposed to be Khabib versus Tony, which is a foreign thought to all of us, and it was supposed to take place here at Barclays Center in Brooklyn. I had tickets. That week, I had lined up a host of amazing people from the UFC community, including yourself. I think it was like Megan O'Leary, Hunter Campbell. I was trying to get John back in here. So all of that fell through, but I'm happy to have you here, and maybe one day, hopefully in studio. But thank you. Well, here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, I'll be hitting up that studio one day. I'm of the belief that this year by the end of the year, we're gonna see a lot more normalcy in the world. I'm willing that into the universe.
I love it. Me too. I told you a few seconds ago, is there a tidbit, a story, a little something that the world doesn't know about Laura Fancy Sanko?
I wanted to like come up with some really great inspirational anecdote, because I find your podcast to be very inspiration based, and I love that. But I struggled to find that. And so literally all I landed on is I can turn both of my feet completely backwards.
Really?
Which is so gross and not at all inspiring.
Did like kind of like the dancers do?
Or
like completely backwards?
Just imagine, like, as long as there's enough, it's hard for me to do on a slippery floor, like on a wood floor if I have socks on. But if I have shoes on, like, I can stand there and like turn my feet completely backwards. It's gross. It's really gross. But it also means I cannot be heel hooked, at least in that direction.
Oh, I guess.
Don't tell the people I compete against.
So I want to take you back a little bit. If I told a 15-year-old Laura Sanko she'd be one of the top dogs here in the UFC, what would she have told me?
She would have said, "What is UFC?"
Okay.
Yeah, I think I had very different aspirations at that age. If you'd have hit me a little bit older, I think I would have said, yeah, that's what I'm gunning for, and that's what I'm envisioning, and I'm going to make that happen. But at 15, I was on my way to getting my black belt, but I hadn't really discovered MMA yet. I didn't find MMA till like right when I was in college. So yeah, I was a piano performance guru at that point. I got a full ride scholarship in piano performance. So I was piano and karate, and that was my whole life.
What did you hope maybe when you were younger that life would be when, you know, mid-30s, 40s?
That's such an interesting question. It's an interesting exercise to think, okay, at that age, what did I want my life to be? What did I think my life would be? I think, I grew up in a really conservative Christian household. So a lot of my growing up kind of centered around like family. What is your family going to be? I'm sure I thought I would be married, which I am. I'm sure I thought I'd have a ton of kids, which I don't. I just have one son. And I don't think I thought I would have a career, interestingly enough. I think my mind was more in the mode of what was modeled to me, which was a stay-at-home mom. And while I love that role for myself, because I'm kind of able to play both roles, right? With the job that I have, I'm in career mode when I'm traveling, and then when I'm home, for the most part, am able to be essentially a stay-at-home mom. So I kind of have figured out a way to make both of them work simultaneously.
Well, I think what also is something that over the past couple of days I've listened to a lot of your appearances on different shows, and in listening to you, you strike me as someone that's incredibly motivated, dedicated, kind of like go-getter mentality. And I'm curious is if that's something that was, you talk about your Christian conservative background. were you always like this? I mean, I feel like sometimes in those Christian conservative backgrounds, I know I have friends that grew up like that, you know, it's a little bit dissuaded to be kind of go-getter, especially if you're a woman. And, you know, so I don't know.
I wouldn't say that my parents actively dissuaded it, but it was sort of, and they won't ever hear this, so I'm not saying it. I will say it was subconsciously done. And I think I only realized that within the last 5 or 6 years. So for instance, I was a major nerd, not in the sense of like, I didn't know how to socialize well, like I had a good social life, but I was really, really academically minded. And I took, I don't know how it is where you're on the East Coast, but in the Midwest, ACTs are way more important than SATs. So I took the ACT when I was in 9th grade and got a 34.
Jesus.
And but then the point I'm getting to is like, I got a 36 in science, and like it was incredible.
Yeah,
I was surprised even myself.
9th grade.
Yes, and
That's impressive.
my parents were like excited and happy, but there was no talk of like, oh my gosh, we need to see if she can go to MIT or like, you know, Stanford or Harvard, or none of that. Like it was always talked about in my family that I would go to college, but it was never like, oh, you're going to college because you're so smart and you're going to like become some amazing scientist and change the world. It was like, oh, cool, you're smart. That's great. But you're also going to be a good mom. You know?
Now, how do you break out of that mold?
I don't think they even knew. Well, I kind of didn't, to be honest with you. In that one regard, I didn't. So I did end up going to a local liberal arts college on a music scholarship. I never should have done that. Like if I had had someone who had looked at that and said, wow, your brain is geared towards science. And even to this day, like science lights me up. So I never really had someone doing that. So I just sort of like went with my other passion, which was music. And then I realized in college that like, I don't love practicing for 6 hours a day and living in a practice room. And I've got really small hands, and like, this is not actually my passion. I just like expressing myself. So all of that to say, like it took quite a bit of a roundabout turn. And it wasn't until, I guess, after I graduated and I started putting my mind to work in the business world. So I was in early stage startup finance when I first graduated out of college, and got involved in a startup company and lived in New York City and did that whole thing. And then just, to be honest with you, where I am now is such a amazing, awesome accident. It really is. I wish I could tell you I planned this all out, and that would be really inspiring. But it's just through a bunch of fortuitous accidents, but also being ready and knowing in those moments what I wanted, and being prepared for the small steps each time a door opened, I guess.
Well, I think also, you know, it's, you know, of course, accidents, I guess, but also through hard work and I guess positioning yourself in the right way. And I think a lot of people, it seems, and also in doing prep for this, you know, the higher ups of the UFC also notice your hard work and kind of the development. And to think that, so you came in the UFC in 2016, I believe. That's correct?
Yes, I think so. That sounds right. Yeah.
4 years later, I mean, I don't know if you've seen this article by The Sun. It says something along the lines, I think this was from October, where I think Dana, I hope it's accurate, had said that he wouldn't be surprised to see you as a commentator one day.
Yeah, you know, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I don't know what, you know, but I think as a fan, as someone that watches you in the UFC and admires your work, I think that's, it's pretty remarkable, you know, from what you're talking about, growing up in that, in the life that you did to be where you are today. Yeah,
you know, and I think there were seeds, you know, all along the way, there were seeds that I fostered growing up that did allow for this to happen. So like, even though, like I said, my science mind or whatever was not necessarily fostered, I was constantly finding ways to compete and break outside the mold that would be considered standard for me. So like, I was always attracted to guy type things. I had an older brother, and like I hung out with him and his friends probably more than I did my own friends. And so, man, whether it was playing electric guitar or like rock climbing in college, or I I don't know, whatever it was, like I was always wanting to do stuff that was not standard for girls and that people didn't expect from me. And then the karate turned into the MMA, and MMA was probably the biggest blossoming moment, I guess you could say, in terms of like really finding what fed my personality and what fed my passion, because the competition at the time was not, I never got into MMA because I thought I could become famous or I thought I could make some career about it, because at that time when I was first getting into it, there were no women in the UFC. There was no path to stardom or riches. And I did it just because I loved the challenge of forcing myself to do something that scared me so much. So that very much dovetailed into where I find myself today. And I appreciate you saying that. You know, I think it is neat to see the amount that I've been able to carve out for myself, I guess, within the UFC world. And I try to do a better job of appreciating what I have been able to accomplish thus far, because I'm a very impatient and driven person. And so often all I can see is where I want to be. And like, I get frustrated with where I am, and I don't appreciate where I've been because all I can see is where I want to be. And it seems far away a lot of times. And I think, I don't know, I'm learning through conversations like this and through reading I do, just to be more appreciative of the small steps along the way.
And what's the reaction from your family been like on this? You know, I guess first when you made your introduction to MMA actually as a, you know, competitor or participant or whatever you want to call it. I mean, later a competitor, of course. And then now, you know, working for the UFC.
Well, if you talk about my parents, I mean, they didn't and still don't understand it at all. They've always been like, I don't know, begrudgingly supportive, I guess you might say. Like, they don't, especially when I first started, they completely disapproved it, but I was already out of the house. Like, they had no choice. It was like, cool, mom and dad, I'm doing this. You can be interested or not, but I'm doing it regardless. You know, I was in my 20s, so it kind of didn't matter. But yeah, they really did not approve. They never went to any of my fights. But they would ask, you know, after the fight, how did you do? Still to this day, they don't watch a lot of UFC broadcasts, but after the fact, they always like me to, you know, have them over to my house, and they want me to show the different times I'm on television. So like, they care, they don't get it. You know, they don't have that, competition to them was never a big value. So I really don't even know how it came to be such a core part of my personality.
Where do you think that competition stemmed from? Is it because they lacked that competition, or they didn't really, that wasn't down their alley?
I think, you know, I had a really close relationship with my older brother. Like, he was the person that I wanted to impress all the time. He was the person whose attention I craved all the time. He's 4 years older than I am. And then also, you know, as a surplus of that, I wanted the attention and praise of like his group of people, his friends. So I always had this like chip on my shoulder where I was constantly trying to prove that I could do it. Like, if they would jump off a cliff into a lake, yeah, I'm going to jump off the cliff too. You know, like, that was just kind of, I think it came from that, from a young age, whether it's like I'm 5 years old and I just got my training wheels off and these guys are taking off down this really steep hill, and I got either join them or get left in the dust. And I'm just like, fuck it. I probably didn't say fuck it because I was 5, but I hope I didn't say fuck.
I hope so.
But you know, that's what I mean. Like, it was always sort of like I'm just going to make it happen. I'm just going to do it because I want to prove that I can, and that I can keep up and be equal to these guys. And so I think that's something that was instilled in me at a really young age. I instilled it in myself, I think.
Do you think if you didn't have the upbringing that you did, that you would be in the position you're in today?
No, I think it's impossible to imagine a life that's different than what it is, right? Like, I've got this mug right here. Oh, I got to turn around. It is what it is. And I mean that in like a positive way. You know, I'm thrilled with where I am. And while I have lots and lots of goals and lots of things I still want to achieve, I'm still really happy with the way that my life is situated. And I really can honestly say that I don't regret doing things the way they did. It's interesting to ponder, like, okay, well, what if I had ended up going to some prestigious college? I'm sure that my life would have taken a very different direction, but I didn't, and I'm here and I'm happy.
And so there's one thing, again, in listening to you, I listened to your full episode with Brendan Fitzgerald the other day on his podcast. I had Brendan on actually last week, and he's a fantastic guy. And it's that, and I texted him actually yesterday after I listened to it because I thought it was so good. First of all, I love your guys' dynamic. I think that's a fun one, but it's also, you opened up about a lot of different things in there. That I think are really important for men and women out there to hear, with regards to just, I guess, how sports in general can be therapeutic in a sense. For you, it was MMA. Yeah. And I think, if you don't mind, I mean, I know you've told the story a couple different times, but just how MMA, I mean, you said, and I don't want to misquote you, but something in the realm of how MMA saved you basically 3 different times. Yeah. And I think one of those, I mean, I'll let you maybe dive into a couple of those or whichever you're comfortable with. But I think for the people out there to hear about you in a different sense, because we see you under the UFC, but there's so much more to you than just what we see on ESPN. So if you don't mind just explaining a little bit how, what it means when you say MMA saved me.
Yeah, I have a tendency to be... I do have a tendency to be an anxious person, a worrisome person, and maybe even prone to, I would say prone to seasons of depression. I've never really been someone who's been stuck in like years and years. And I'm sensitive to the people who deal with depression on an ongoing basis. It would be a weight that I can't even imagine, but having gone through it for seasons, it's such a quicksand. Like, it's so hard to fight your way out of it. You almost can't, I guess. And so the one thing that I found that really allowed me to just create space in my brain and have even a couple of hours where I wasn't fixating and worrying and trying to fix my own problems in my head was MMA. And what happened was I was, again, that the upbringing that I told you about, and how really it was never explicitly stated, but it was sort of inferred that my goal was to go to college and find a nice guy and get married and make a family, right? That's what you do. And I thought I was doing that, and I got married way too young. I was 24, 23. I can't remember, honestly. Very short-lived, 6 months long, terrible, horrible, giant dumpster fire. And I felt like such a massive failure because I had up until that point been, perfect grades, salutatorian, homecoming queen, like all of these things, just perfect. And then in my world, in the Christian world, marriage is the one thing that you don't fuck up, right? Yeah. So, and then here I did and went and just completely right into the ground. So it was really alarming to me that like I was making this, what felt like just this massive life mistake, and my life was over, and yada, yada, yada. So I knew that karate had been really good for me in high school, and I thought, okay, I need to find a martial art. I need to find something to pour myself into that's physical, but it can't be something where I can think about something else at the same time. Like, it can't be running, because that's just more thinking. It can't be lifting weights. It's just more time to be alone in my head. And I tell you what, man, when you're doing jiu-jitsu or you're striking, not only do you get the release of like the exercise endorphins and you feel good because you're exercising and you're hitting something, but you literally can't think about anything else. And so that hour and a half passes, and all of a sudden, like, you're done, and you think, man, I still, like, nothing has changed in my life in this last hour and a half, but I just feel 10% better. And every day I would feel 5 or 10% better. And over time, it saved me. And again, later on in life, when I lived in New York and went through another tough season in my personal life, the exact same thing. It was the only social interaction I had when I lived in New York City, because I didn't know anybody, and I was so lonely and lost, and like didn't know what to do with myself in that city. So it was the only place where I had friends. And again, it was just this ability to go there and forget kind of the troubles in my head and my heart and come away refreshed. So it's a sport unlike any other. It's amazing.
And I think that, for people, whether it's MMA or other sports, I think a lot of those same emotions or feelings come from that. And I think I personally love that story. When I first heard it, I thought it was amazing. But there's also one thing I wanted to ask you with regards to, getting married at a young age and it not working out the way, the way it did. What's your advice for perhaps other, young men and women who also grew up in young Christian conservative families, and that was always kind of the goal, where it didn't work out and they got married young and they perhaps made, if you want to call it a mistake or not, and it didn't work out and they felt that kind of shame. What is something that you wish maybe you had told yourself in that time?
Yeah, I just, my faith has really morphed into something that, and I'll be honest, there's probably a lot of people I grew up with that would maybe not approve of the version of Christianity that I subscribe to at this point, but I'm okay with that. I think at the end of the day, Christianity, God, the universe, like life source, whatever you want to call it, is not about feeling. It's not about inflicting shame or guilt. Like the problem I have with organized religion a lot of times is the emphasis on feeling bad when you've made mistakes. And if you go through, the New Testament, like his focus is not about making people feel bad. Like it's just not there. So I think my advice to them would be to just move on. I mean, it's as simple as that. Like it's unfortunate. It's not the perfect way we would have had things play out for ourselves, but it doesn't change, your value as a human being. And it doesn't change your value as a Christian or your ability to be a good husband or wife moving forward. Nothing changes that. It's a mistake. And even then, I wouldn't even call it a mistake. I'm glad I did what I did. I am, because I will try very hard to convince my son not to even consider putting a ring on some girl's finger until he's 30. I don't think anybody should get married until they're 30. That's my personal belief.
What's that been like in terms of raising your son and based off of your experience growing up and now being a mother? How have those experiences kind of molded the mother that you now are?
That's a good question. Well, we don't go to church. I don't know that that's something I should necessarily be proud of. But we don't. We just haven't found one that we like. And my husband wasn't raised that way. And so our approach to talking about God is interesting because he does go to a Christian school. And so, and I wanted him to go to a school that would impart good, solid values and would place him in a come from homes where those values are important. That being said, I'm much more, even at this age, even though he's only 7, a lot of times he'll ask me a question and I'll give him the standard Christian answer, but then I will also say, but you know what? Like we've got some friends who are Jewish and their son's name is True. I said, but you know what? True probably doesn't think that because he was raised, in a different faith and they would probably see it this way. Or, Muslim friends of mine, they would see it this way. I try to make it a little bit more well-rounded in terms of understanding that not everyone thinks like we do, and that's okay.
I love it. And so my other question with regards to motherhood is another moment that you talked about, another time that MMA saved you in a sense, and I think it was right after you became a mother. And I think that was, when I heard that story, I thought it was a beautiful story, just because I have a mother. I will never be a mother, but I can imagine that a lot of women have gone through a lot of similar feelings, and so I just wanted to hear that story, and for the people that aren't familiar with that story, if you don't mind just resharing it quickly, because I think it's really a great one.
Yeah, I think I would never call my son an accident. He's the best thing that's ever happened. And I was planning on having kids one day, and I was married. So like all of the things that you would like to be in place were certainly in place. But that being said, he was a bit of a surprise in that I was training for my next fight. And so when I got pregnant, it was like, oh, wow. I had imagined my life. You know, I had won my pro debut, got the second round submission. Like, I had a great amateur career. At that point, I think I ended up like 7-1 overall. So like I'm starting to feel like, okay, I'm pretty good at this. Like I can do this sport. Things are happening in MMA that make it exciting. Women are in the UFC now. Like, I start to envision this path, and then I'm pregnant, and I thought, man, what am I going to do? You know, how am I going to do this? And I knew I wanted to be a mom, though, so I just sort of pivoted, and I always imagined I would come back to fighting. And when I realized how much that this little person needed me, you know, on a day-to-day basis, every day, all the time, literally needed me at first, you know, and then less literally moving on, it was really tough. It was really, really tough. I think part of it was just biological and chemical postpartum depression, but a big part of it was my identity got like snatched away from me when I was not expecting it. You know, I identified as an athlete, as an MMA fighter, as someone who potentially had the ability to go to the UFC and do big things. And then all of a sudden I'm like, you know, dripping milk and fucking wearing my house coat and like my kids screaming. And I just want to go to Target in peace, you know? And like, I just had a really hard time wrapping my mind around, is this my life, you know? And then again, it was like getting back in the gym and finding the resources to help watch my son and take care of my son. So I could have even, you know, at first it was just like 3 hours a week where I could get back in the gym and feel like an athlete again, and feel like I could exercise that competitive side of myself again. So yeah, it's, you know, and obviously I never returned to fighting competitively, but I haven't left the gym for a long period since, and that's a long time ago. So I still love training very, very much, and I'm in the gym all the time.
Do you ever have any, I guess, quote unquote, regrets about, also, I mean, you came up in a time and in a weight class that was so scarce. I mean, you talk about, you know, I think going through different chats to just try to find opponents. You know, you came up in a time where, you know, women's MMA only really got big not so long ago. And now, you know, it's beautiful when you see women headlining, I believe, pay-per-views. We've had a bunch of different ones. Sure. But what was that like for you to know that, okay, you know, I'm a mother, the professional career might not happen the way I imagined it, but, you know, here I am. Like, what's going on through your head at that point in time?
There are definitely moments where I get that pang of, like, I wouldn't say it's regret, but just maybe a little bit bittersweet. So Paige Van Zandt and I debuted on the same card the same night, and there are times where I see her career and, you know, the success that she's had both in the octagon and obviously even more so success outside of the octagon. And I think, man, I wonder if that could have been me, you know. But by the same token, the UFC still doesn't have an atomweight class, and I'm not framed right to compete with strawweights. So it's like part of me wistfully wonders, but part of me feels like I am where I'm meant to be. The only thing I guess that's frustrating is, like, with the goals I have now to do commentary and to do more analysis, it's tough because I don't have 10 pro fights to, hey, look at my experience. You know, it's really difficult to have that instant credibility without that resume. And I think I've been able to do it in this other avenue in some ways, but I know that more is necessary. So really that's my goal right now, is to find avenues where I can exercise my analytical legs and kind of let people know that I do know what I'm talking about and I can analyze on the fly. And, like, I really do understand the fight game, even though I wasn't able to participate in the UFC ever. And I wasn't able to participate professionally for a long time. That just wasn't an option in my weight class and given what was going on in my life. But I feel like over time I've been able to, through a variety of circumstances, gain the understanding from a lot of fighters, a lot of coaches at this point. If you were to ask, a bunch of them, does Laura know what she's like? Yeah, she knows what she's talking about. So I think that I think it's just a matter of time, and I have to be patient. I have to do the work. More importantly,
when you say that instant credibility, I mean, do you feel like you want to validate your own credibility, or it's the other people on the outside looking in, the fear of them not thinking that you're credible in that sense?
It's both. I'm confident in my skills and in my ability to do the things I need to do to be successful, whether it's as a desk analyst or ultimately as a commentator. It's more, and I understand this. So there's hesitation within the UFC, understandably, as to, you can't, in their mind, it's difficult to put me and next to, Dominic Cruz and be like, hey, have a discussion. Maybe you guys will disagree, right? I can understand why on paper they would be resistant to that idea, but I point to a lot of really great examples in other sports where you have women in particular, that's the lens I'm looking at this through, who either didn't play the sport at all or played it in a different version. In other words, like you've got women calling Major League Baseball games who had a great collegiate softball career. They know the sport. They have grown to understand the nuances of not just softball, but baseball. And they do a great job calling games. There are a lot of women who played collegiate basketball who work at the NBA level. A lot of them I know started out as sideline reporters and worked their way up to call games. So that's the track I'd like to be on. That is the track I think would be successful in the UFC. It's kind of one of those situations where, like, if the UFC puts their stamp on you and if the people around me put their stamp on me, then other people will come to accept it. But I've been pleasantly surprised by the number of fans, and 99 times out of 100 they're guys, reach out to me and say, hey, like, I hope you can do it. I can't wait to hear you call a fight one day. I hope that they make this happen. Like, I'm all here for it. Now, I know that there would be a lot who would be like completely against it, but I think it's something that needs to happen eventually.
Do you feel like, there was one, do you feel like there was a moment, or maybe you haven't felt that yet, I don't know, that you made it, that this is, and I think that what I notice in a lot of successful people is that they never really feel like they quote unquote made it. And you probably strike me as someone who, I hope, is satisfied to an extent, but you'll never, a lot of the top dogs always want a little bit more. Is there, how do you gauge that?
Yeah, I definitely don't feel like I've made it by any chance or any stretch of the imagination, because my goals are so far beyond where I am currently. But that being said, there's been some cool moments that I've looked back on. Like, when I was working for Invicta, Dana came to one of the fights, and I didn't even know he was coming. It was like this last minute thing, because it was a time where Chris Cyborg was still fighting for Invicta, but the UFC was helping support her career in Invicta to help build her up. So Dana was interested in coming. The Fertitta brothers were there as well. And I didn't even know at the time, like, how big of a deal that was. I mean, I knew it was a big deal, but looking back, I didn't know how big of a deal that was. And my producer told me, he's like, hey, Dana's coming tonight. You should interview him. And this was like, the card has already started. Like, the fights are already underway. I'm already in the midst of doing post-fight interviews. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Yes, that would be amazing. Long story endless. They try to send me to go find him in between fights, and the cameraman's supposed to meet me there and have this interview. I find him. The cameraman is nowhere to be seen and I don't have talk back on my mic. I have no way to communicate with the truck. And we're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And now I know, like, you do not make Dana wait. You just don't. It's rude. He's got too much shit to do. He's a nice guy, but, like, that is the biggest no-no in the UFC world. You do not make Dana wait. I made that poor man wait at least 8 minutes, which is an eternity.
Wow.
When you're just
That's a long time.
Oh, how are you? But he was so gracious about it. and gracious to all the fans that were coming up to him. And after that interview, I said to him, I said, I want to work for you one day. I want to work in the UFC, and I want to be, part of the UFC broadcast.
So you said that to him?
I said it right to him. And what's crazy is, like, I really hadn't planned on saying it. I didn't have like this big, I'm going to meet Dana, and then this is going to happen, and then I'm going to say this. Like,
what came about?
In that, this is going to sound so cheesy, but like in that interview, I was like, I belong here. Like, I belong talking to this man. And I know I can do this, and I know I can do more of it, and I know I can do it at a higher level than I currently am. And so I just said it. And it was kind of brazen of me to say, especially considering I think that was like only my 5th Invicta show. Like, I just started talking on television. I didn't go to school for this, right? And then, nothing happened for a while. Nothing.
Well, what was his reaction when you said that?
He was really kind about it. He's like, I'm trying to remember exactly how he phrased it. He said, it was a little bit of like a pat answer, he's like, well, just keep doing what you're doing. We'll keep an eye on you, or something like that. He was nice about it, but it wasn't like a, yes, I see star potential in you. Come work for me tomorrow. It was not that, at all. But he was super nice about it. And I remember the next time that I interviewed him as a UFC employee, it was when they opened the PI. I was like part of their opening ceremony thing, and they were putting together like a corporate video. And so I interviewed him, and afterwards I was like, do you remember me? And he said, yeah, I do. I said, do you remember what I said to you? He said, yeah, I remember what you said. He said, welcome to the team. And I was like,
That's a beautiful moment.
Yeah, it was cool.
What was the call like when you got the call that you were gonna work for the UFC now?
Awesome. That was quite a process in and of itself. I got the call to come try out. First of all, the way I even figured out how to contact them was crazy, and I told that story on.
Well, I'm gonna spoil it really quickly.
Yeah, it's too long of a story.
Let's just put it this way: you had a contact that before our president. I don't even know how to say it.
How do we even say this?
Basically Michael Cohen, the former attorney for the president, yep. Who I think when this episode will come out will not be president anymore. I guess you guys knew each other.
I knew him from New York, not politically affiliated whatsoever. Right. Just knew him.
You guys were just friends. I mean, this was also so long ago, and I'll just summarize quickly that story. Basically, you guys, I think, kept in touch, and I think you made mention of your aspirations of perhaps working in the UFC one day, and I think he made a couple calls, and some weirdly enough, here we are.
Yes, weirdly enough, here we are. And it wasn't. I still had to audition. The audition was so stressful. It was ridiculously stressful. And because I was auditioning as an anchor, which I had barely spoken to one camera holding one mic, let alone dealing with a boom mic, and I'd never read from a teleprompter. I had never had analysts to address. I had no experience in that whatsoever.
Those nerves must have been off the chart.
It was awful. It was so nerve-wracking, and you feel like this is my only shot. Like this is make or break. Like I either do well and maybe this happens, or I don't, and I go home and I cry. And they threw me some curveballs in the audition that I don't know how well I did with those. Some of them I did well with, some of them not so much. And on my way home, I thought it felt like the biggest walk of shame ever, because they don't you don't finish the audition and they don't immediately go, oh my gosh, you were great, and we're going to offer you a job next week. They're just like, okay, thanks for coming out. Your car's outside, and good safe travels. And so I remember walking through the LA airport, because it was at Fox Studios, and just crying. I was like, that was so bad. I was so frustrated. I was so disappointed in myself. And this is actually a story I've never told.
Okay.
This is so crazy. I was crying. I was really upset. And I can't believe I've never told this story before.
I'm excited.
This is so random. So this guy comes up to me, and he was a Hasidic Jew. Like he had,
Okay.
I don't know the proper term, but the curls,
The
hat, like he would clearly. And he said, "You look like you're having a really rough day. Would you like to go to the American Airlines lounge with me?" And I was like, I think I was just like, sure. But in my head, I'm like, what is happening right now? Like,
wait, you've passed security.
Yes.
And you're just like, you're
he had been in line in front of me in security.
Okay.
And I think it like,
you're still crying in the line. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Whole time. And so it was like as we were both leaving security, he just kind of like looked over. He's like, "You look like you're having a really rough day. Would you like to go?" It was either Delta or American, I can't remember, or United, I don't know, to the lounge with me. And I don't have a first class ticket, so I was like, sure. And then in my head, I'm like, what are you doing? You don't know this man? Like, he could just be dressed like that to, confuse you, and he's going to try to kidnap you. Like, what are you doing, But I did. I went to, we'll just call it the United Lounge with this guy. And it turns out that he was, and again, I'm not going to remember the proper term, but there's a term in that community for someone who is a settler of disputes, but also like a licensed psychologist.
Huh. Interesting.
And I'm going to have to Google the term now because it's going to drive me crazy. So it turns out like he's a psychologist within the Hasidic community. And his job is to like, counsel people, marital counsel, settle disputes within the community. And so he just sat there and like, it was the funniest thing. He's like, "Get a drink." And I was like, "I'm sure you don't drink." He's like, "No, I don't, but you get a drink." And I was like, okay. So I'm like sipping this champagne, and he just starts like dissecting me. He's like, "So what's going on?" And I told him, and we ended up having like this 2-hour conversation about my life and my goals. And like, I couldn't even tell you his name now. And like, I haven't heard from him since, never talked to him again, but it was like a life-changing discussion where he basically told me not to give up and that good things were going to happen.
That sounds like an absolute movie. I hope you have people that could perhaps turn that into something one day.
It sounds fake, but I swear to God, this happened. It was the weirdest, coolest thing.
And then did you feel better once you got on the plane?
Yeah, I did. I'm telling you, it was 180 degrees. Wow. Like it was, I don't really believe in like angels or anything like that, but it was definitely, whether you believe in the law of attraction or angel, whatever it was a spiritual moment. We'll call it that. It was a spiritual moment where this person I had no reason to have an interaction with under normal circumstances sought me out, sat me down, got me a drink of champagne, and then proceeded to just like dive into my heart and brain and like pull out the tangles and like lay it out before me in a way that helped me move forward and see what had just happened as a positive thing. And then like 3 weeks later, they called. They're like, "Hey, you want to be a UFC reporter?"
Well, even just before that, I think that's also just like a beautiful story of, I think, America at its finest. A Christian conservative girl from the Midwest getting sat down by a Hasidic psychologist, we'll call him that.
In the United Club.
I mean, it doesn't get more beautiful than that.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
So then you get the call 3 weeks later, and what's going through your, I mean, at that point you thought there was no chance you were going to get it.
At that point it was like, well, I tried. I'll just nose to the grindstone. I'll keep getting better, and then maybe I'll beg him for another shot. I was over the moon, and I couldn't believe it. And I don't think even then I knew how big of a deal it was. I think, kind of like I said earlier about appreciating my own journey more, I need to also appreciate just what I have now is I know what a lot of people would like to have. And so I try to be I try to recognize that and genuinely be grateful, because I love, love, love what I do. And I love the sport, and I love the UFC, and I love the fighters. And like, I'm so in love with what I do. It's just that I want to do more of it.
And I think and I think you see that when you work. And I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about your work is you can tell just as a fan who loves what they do and who's really, I mean, when you're doing a Contender Series and you're next to someone whose life is literally changing and you're experiencing that with them, you have the authentic reaction, I think, alongside them that their life is going to change. And I think that's beautiful.
It is, yes. That show is another like life-changing moment for me, honestly, because I feel like it's the show where I'm able to be a little bit more what I know I can be in terms of be a little bit more analytical, be a bigger part of the presentation of the show. And then, but really what I love the most is just, like you say, the moments with those fighters where they're realizing their dreams, and to be next to someone when that's happening, like the energy that's coming off of someone that has just realized a lifelong dream is crazy. Like, and to be able to absorb some of that is awesome. Is
there a moment that stood out from the Contender Series when you're with someone that just got that contract that is gonna have a life-changing opportunity come their way?
Oh man, there's a lot.
Maybe like like behind the state, back scene that we don't even see on camera, where perhaps you have an interaction with them that isn't caught.
Honestly, some of the cooler reactions maybe after the fact that people wouldn't know about is I get attached to pretty much everybody that comes on that show because I spend so much time researching them, and like I'm just a very emotional, empathetic person anyway, and I get really wrapped up in people. I love people. And so when people come on and they don't win, it's tough. And like I know what it's like to toil in this sport, and how hard it is to feel like you came that close and you didn't succeed, right? So a lot of times I message the guys that don't get contracts or don't win and just try to encourage them, because there's nothing worse than like having this fight week where the cameras are on you and they're interviewing you and they're hyping you up and they're like, yeah, you've got, 10 wins and only 1 loss, and like you're a D1 wrestler and da-da-da. And then the fight happens and you lose, and it's like, bye. It's not that the UFC does that. It's just the machine, right? It's the machine of fighting. And so I try to make a point to reach out and just let them know that it's not the end. And there have been many instances where guys have come on that show and either not won or not won a contract and gone on to fight in the UFC. You have to stay ready. Anybody who's been on that show is on a short list for people to fill in. So like, you can't give up.
And for you, I guess personally in your work, how do you continue to get better? I mean, I know that something that I imagine you spend a lot of time on, and just how can I get better? How can in my preparations, whatnot. Thinking where you were in 2016 to where you are now, what do you think has been the biggest change and improvements, and what are still the improvements that you look to make as in all the work that you are doing and are going to continue to do?
Well, I can always improve. There are a lot of things, I think, particularly because I didn't go to school for this, there are times where I'm sure I lack a little bit of broadcast nuance or polish. I try to take a hold of every opportunity that I can. That's the biggest thing. I try to, it sounds silly, but even coming on podcasts like this, anytime where you're presenting yourself and you are trying to articulate an idea and do it well and do it passionately and do it effectively is, in a sense, a rep. We say like you just have to have more reps. The perfect rep for me, obviously, is to do what I ultimately want to do. So I make working for Invicta a really high priority, because I do color commentary for Invicta, and the more opportunities that I can have to work in that organization, the more practice I can get. It's the closest I can get to doing what I ultimately want to do. But I would say just cram as many opportunities as you can. So like last year, there was a week where I did 4 shows in 8 days.
Oh my God.
It was awful. But I'm glad I did it because it teaches you how to, sometimes I can like over prepare because I don't know if it's my love of academia and studying and researching or whatever, but like I could get too much in the weeds on a particular fighter or topic or whatever. And sometimes when I have to cram, like when I did a Invicta show a few months back on 4 hours notice, like they called me the morning of the fights. And so like, and that does not include the time to do my makeup and hair. Wow. And not only that, but there's certain elements that the producer needs beforehand. So he's like, I need your 3 keys to victory for the main event. Like I need this and this and this. So I'm like, I didn't even know who the main event was to be. I mean, I knew, but like I had not given it much thought at all because I wasn't working that show. So that experience, I considered not doing it because I thought, okay, if I do this and I'm terrible, I know that my bosses at the UFC watch Invicta. It's on Fight Pass. When fighters from Invicta graduate to the UFC, they go back and they watch those fights and they hear me speaking. I could really fuck this up, right? Especially with no preparation. I don't know much about these girls' games at this point. I knew some of them, but not all of them. Or I can say, you know what? Most of color commentary is calling what you see and being quick on the draw with what is happening right in front of you. And the rest, like, because we've got Julie Kedzie and TJ DeSantis as well. Like, Julie can carry the storylines, and TJ is amazing at that as well. Like, they're going to know the background because I missed out on all the background interviews. So I thought, you know what? Fuck it. Let's do it. And it worked great. It was really good. It was really good.
At what point did you realize that commentary was the route you wanted to ultimately go? I'm a naturally competitive person, and I think it's not just about the fact that commentary or commentators are considered the top, broadcasters in this world. It's more like, while I love the reporter role for ESPN, I love it more for Contender Series because it's right after the fights. It's more of a Joe Rogan interview. Like, they're still sweaty, they're still antsy, they're still out of breath, and like they're in the moment. I love what I do for ESPN, but it's a much different interview when you're sitting in chairs and like I only have precisely 2.5 minutes to speak to them. And a lot of times you end up discussing the same information that you would for another fighter, right? Like, or the pre-interviews. What was your game plan? Like, I want to talk about the X's and O's. I want to talk about what happened in the fight, not just how you felt or like how was your fight week? I want to talk about the X's and the O's, like the nitty gritty, the detail of why you throw your hook kind of slappy versus like turning your elbow over. Why was it so important to funnel the guy against the cage and maintain range, and like the really, really nitty gritty stuff that I find fascinating as a nerdy fan, I guess, is what I would like to express and what gets me excited to talk about. Like, when I'm watching fights with other fighters, that's my favorite thing in the world. Like, if I'm watching a fight with James Krause or like anybody else from my gym, I want to talk about the specifics of what's happening. Like, why the fuck is he doing that with his foot? Like, why is his stance like that? Like, oh my God, this guy, that's got to be so difficult to deal with. Like, the way that he's moving and the way that he's switching stances. Oh my God, that has to be so frustrating for this other fighter. That's the stuff that it gets me pumped up to talk about, as much as I do love the storytelling of what was your mindset like and all of that. Like, I want to be in the fight, Other than commentary, I mean, you talked about having other goals, and you're still, I mean, so young, period, and so young in your broadcasting career.
Oh, bless you.
that I mean, really, I think it's pretty unanimous around the board. I think the sky's the limit for you. For you, where do you hope to see your career, say? I mean, it's crazy. You've only been there for 4 years, but say in 5 or 10 years down the line.
I would like, my goal, and I actually wrote this out this year, my goal is not necessarily monetary, although I hope that would follow. I want to be a well-known, well-respected voice in MMA. And what that looks like, I think, can take a variety of shapes, right? I mean, we've seen other people with my job. Ariel Helwani had my job at one point, and he's gone on to be like the voice in MMA media. And not only that, like, so he's able to express his knowledge of the sport through the interviews he does, but he also has a hilarious show with DC where they talk about serious topics, but they also, I freaking love, I mean, those two are so
DC has the most contagious laugh, I think, in the world.
He really does. He really does. And when he constantly is like covering up with a napkin or something, or, like, I love that guy. I love that guy. But to be, I keep envisioning myself at that desk with a headset on. That's what I see.
And when, I mean, I don't know, you know, I'm always curious to ask my guests, hopefully so many more years of long, healthy life. But do you ever think about legacy? Perhaps the Laura Sanko legacy, if you will?
Yeah. I do. You know, and it's funny because like talking about all this stuff is in some way uncomfortable for me, because there's like part of my brain that I'm a big believer in, you know, the law of attraction and things like that. So there's part of my brain that's very comfortable saying out loud what I want, because I say it out loud on a regular basis just as an exercise. But there's the other part of my brain that knows that people will watch this or hear this and either laugh at it or not so much laugh at it, but like, I don't know, not see it the way that I see it, and think that I'm delusional for having that desire. And so it's like, it's hard. It's very, it feels very revealing to like put myself out there like this, but I'm appreciating you making me do it. 'Cause it's good for me to do. So the legacy, yeah, I mean, if I'm just being honest, I would like my legacy to be that I was the first woman in the UFC to become a well-known, well-respected voice, whether that's as a color commentator, as a desk analyst, in some other way, shape, or form. I see it as a color commentator, but I could see it taking other forms as well. And it's not to say that other women couldn't do what I'm trying to do. It's not that. It's not like I think I'm the best or the only one. I would like that to be my legacy, because I want there to be other women who do it after me, and who maybe even do it better or bigger or whatever. But like, I want to wedge my way in there as far as I possibly can, so that the girls who are coming up in MMA, who are growing up in it in a way that I never did, can then fill those shoes later.
Let me tell you something. You are absolutely not delusional in thinking that, or that thinking that people would say that. And I'm really not even trying to say that to flattery. I think the truth is that even in digging into your story in the past couple of days in preparations for this, there is a lot that really struck me. And I think that knowing all those things that you went through, and now to see your rise, and I've been a UFC fan for really hardcore, I'd say about 5 years, to see your growth, I think is beautiful. And I think that you're not just inspiring young women out there, but men as well, who are pursuing careers in the sports broadcasting field. And I have no doubts that you will achieve, you know, not just whether it be commentary or whatever you may choose. I truly believe that the sky's the limit, and I just want to thank you for taking the time again today. People can follow you on Twitter, Instagram, Laura_Sanko. But Laura, I'm excited to see all the future that's in store for you, and you know, in-person events, and hopefully next trip to the Barclays Center or the Garden. Hopefully we get you in studio. But
absolutely,
truly a pleasure, honor, and I'm just excited for you.
Thank you, Felix. I appreciate that. And I as someone who is usually on the other side of the interviewer, I appreciate the thought and care that you took in this conversation. So it meant a lot, and it was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram @Felix.Levine. And if you have something to say, please leave a comment.